go without that then. There's a lot of feedback. So thank you for the introduction. So I attended my first hormone conference back in 2003 in Texas. And mainly I went there because nowhere could I find the answers to the hormone questions I had. So back when I was just at Zeller's Pharmacy, there was Premarin, and at that time, and then there was the new CES, which was a generic Premarin, but Premarin was from pregnant horse urine, and CES was a plant-based. But how could they be equivalent? No matter where I looked, I could not find the answers to these questions. So that was part of my driving force to go and learn about hormones. So I was lucky enough to be hired by a compounding pharmacy that was associated with PCCA, Professional Compounding Centers of America. And they are an association that has the best chemicals. They test everything beyond any of the producers of any chemicals. They make formulations and then further test them as well. So a lot of formulations that we compound, we can actually put a beyond use date of up to 6 months, because we can make that claim because we have the formulations and the chemicals used to actually make those that were studied. So recently I went through what's called C4 online education, and this is the new designation programs that PCCA has developed. And what that is a very comprehensive review of all things hormones in this case. So we went through, I think you can advance it one. So comprehensive core concepts in compounding. And within hormones, it was specialized study of ovarian anatomy and physiology, the endogenous hormone function, lab tests and uses, the various clinical compounded treatment therapies, dosing guidelines, and patient counseling. So when I do a hormone consult, and I've been consulting since 2003, I now have, I thought I'd better put some clinical designation behind my name. And it was a great course. So I did online modules to lead up to going to a live course. So it was 20 hours of continuing education online. That's what they gave me, but it probably took more than 40 hours after going down the pathways of reading all the studies that were associated with all the claims. And then a 3-day seminar that I completed in February in Las Vegas on hormones, and meeting all the greatest clinicians out there and some pretty exciting new news. So it was really good to relearn, uptake, get updated, and now I'm looking back at my clinical practice and reevaluating some of my decisions and adapting and tweaking it for each person as I go forward as well. So now you book a hormone consult with us. I have an online booking site. You would then get an email from our vaccination center / Grace Pharmacy, and that's where we have all our online booking for multiple services, which allows you to then log into your own profile, fill out all your forms online, and then when we sit down for a one-on-one consult, which takes about an hour, my staff tell me hour and a half. I'm a little wordy. Then after going through your basically life story in hormones, then I'm able to discern what would be the most appropriate way to then test your hormones. At which point you then take a kit home with you and are able to test at home. It goes to the labs through prepaid postage or courier envelopes, and then it's about 2 weeks later I get the results back, at which point then we're in contact again, and I review the results along with our previous meeting notes to come up with very specific recommendations that I then send to your physician who needs to sign off on it. So this is a relationship, a triad relationship between yourselves, the doctor, and myself, the clinical hormone pharmacist. So why consider HRT? Well, relief of symptoms that may be bothersome to you, prevention of memory loss, heart health, bone production, growth, and repair. I'm often asked, why is this natural? Like, why would I want to add hormones to my body? Isn't it natural that my hormones just fade away? Well, my question back is undergoing hip surgery, heart surgery, transplant surgery natural? In today's modern medicine, we will not let you die. So when your hormones leave you at the age of 50-ish, that leaves you with about 50 years with no hormones. These are our life-giving source, our anti-aging, so to speak. So the question is, what quality of life do you want in the second half of your life when those imbalances start to happen? Okay. So hormones maintain vision, memory, and mentality. Some of the key life quality issues as we age. There's no age limit in starting hormones, but the sooner you start them when your hormones become unbalanced, the better response you'll have. But there are still benefits, even if you were 90. So what are bioidentical hormones? Okay, let's go to that one. So hormones have a lot of jobs, and they regulate growth and repair, involving not just your sex hormones, but also insulin, growth hormone. Then we have testosterone, estrogen, DHEA. There's more hormones involved. This is Dr. Pamela Smith. She is one of the gurus of the hormone world. She is also founding member of A4M, which is in the naturopathic world where they all train under. So with functional medicine and with hormones, she is a physician that has been training and consulting and studying hormones for 40 years now. So I've had the pleasure of going to several seminars over the last 17 years and watching webinars and getting to know more and more of her knowledge and the practice of hormones. Some of you may be able to relate. So symptoms of menopause can include hot flashes, night sweats, vaginal dryness, anxiety, mood swings, irritability, insomnia, depression. This is by no means an exhaustive list. It can be heart palpitations, varicose veins, indigestion, bone loss, arthritis, headaches, hair loss, memory lapses, increased weight, leaky bladder, and we can go on. So the next thing, bioidentical hormones, what are they? You probably can't read this, but so bioidentical hormones, these are biologically identical to the hormone structures that are naturally in our body. But we're not able to go out and extract that from humans or cadavers and get identical hormones to our structure. So they're actually usually plant-based sources, such as soy, corn, or yam. But simply eating those foods will not give you a hormonal response. So they still have to be chemically converted to be the identical structure to what's in your body. And then you'll know what game you're playing. So for instance, Premarin is a natural hormone. It's produced from pregnant horse's urine. And so it's yes, it's naturally produced, but it's an endpoint estrogen. So it's getting at the end of the cycle. What's in pregnant horse urine is about 30 to 50% the same as what's in our bodies naturally. That leaves 50 to 70% of the hormones in Premarin not the same. Sometimes 1,000 times stronger than what our body was ever meant to be exposed to. Then we take that estrogen in a Premarin pill form and we swallow it. Gets fed right into our liver, where now it's going to go through all these metabolism pathways and potentially greatly increase your risks of producing some stronger estrogens even more. Some of us have the ability to clear it and our livers do just great. Some of us aren't so lucky and the pathways can be clogged, and henceforth there could be fuel to fire and metabolizing estrogens down the wrong pathways. So those are some of the more major concerns when taking any kind of estrogen in an oral way, that you could be heading for some disaster. In my practice, and by the recommendations from Pamela Smith, we never dose estrogen orally. It's given topically, and it skips that first pass metabolism and does not have near the same associations of potential risks. So one of the other interesting components in one of the studies, synthetic estrogen like Premarin has a 30 to 50% lower nitric oxide synthase. That's a crucial enzyme in producing nitric oxide for the endothelial cells of your heart. So if it's lowering your heart protective enzyme and the ability for your heart to function well, then your potential for heart disease, cardiovascular disease, is greatly increased when you take Premarin. So here's a little bit of a visual difference between bioidentical and synthetic. So on the right side, we've got progesterone, and back, 15, 20 years ago now, they used to give Premarin and Provera, which is MPA, medroxyprogesterone acetate. So you can see the very similar structures. However, for a drug company to bring a drug to market and create a patent, they put little extra structures on there to create slight differences. So now this is a synthetic progestin, they call it. Now, Provera, or MPA, has a lot of the opposite effects that progesterone does beyond the uterus. So if progesterone was only involved with the uterus, it wouldn't make much of a difference. But there are clearly a lot of different effects throughout the body because we have progesterone receptors everywhere. So for instance, Provera will cause fluid retention and increase your blood pressure. Progesterone is a natural diuretic. If I had a discussion once with a OBGYN, this is a number of years ago, on the difference between progesterone and Provera. And as we were talking, I realized he was using the two words synonymously. And I said, hold the phone. You do understand that progesterone and Provera are two very different things. And he said, no, they're not. I said, okay. Do you agree that when a woman is pregnant, they're absolutely producing a ton of progesterone? That baby is basically swimming in progesterone. And if you don't have enough progesterone, you will have a miscarriage. Yes, I agree. So if Provera was the same thing as progesterone, why is it contraindicated in pregnancy and will cause an immediate miscarriage? Very different effects on the genetic signaling on the different cells when you're not dealing with a bioidentical hormone. So we want to make sure that we know what we're dealing with and dealing with the same thing that your body is accustomed to dealing with. And balance. Balance is always key. There's a hormone symphony in your body. If one's out, they're all out. So for example, if we have a rise in insulin in our body, that's associated to insulin resistance, which is diabetes. That will increase the heart disease risks, increase stroke, increase risk in all cancers, and increase type 3 diabetes, which is Alzheimer's. So when we're looking at hormones, we also need to consider how our diet and other factors are playing a role, because there's pressures from everywhere. So that is another consideration when we go through a consult as to what else do we need to look at, because every one of those hormones will affect one another, and what we eat affects the cascade within our body as well. So just as a little bit of a, you can tell me your symptoms, and I can predict with somewhat the ability to say, oh yeah, your progesterone's low. That's really about the only one I can really truly predict when it comes to symptoms. So you can see hot flashes could be caused by your estrogen being too high or too low. Classically, we think, oh, you don't have enough estrogen, so let's give you more estrogen. That's typically what I see coming out of physicians' offices. And it could just be simply that your progesterone's too low. You've got your estrogen's fine, but there's an imbalance between your progesterone and estrogen. Maybe you're having anxiety. Could be that your estrogen's too high or your progesterone's too low. Those can be simply just balanced back, and those symptoms can resolve. Depression could be low estrogen, high progesterone, low testosterone, high cortisol, low thyroid. Any one of those. Or maybe it's more than one factor that is involved with what's going on there. Vaginal dryness could be low estrogen, high or low cortisol. Headaches, low or high estrogen or progesterone, low testosterone, low thyroid. Hair loss, high testosterone, low or high thyroid, low or high estrogen, low or high progesterone. So you can see by simply looking at symptoms, it could be wide and varied what's really going on at the biological cellular level. So that's why testing is absolutely essential to be a very good clinical tool to make good decisions to balance your hormones. Estrogen has more than 400 functions in the woman's body. Of course, I'm not going to review all those with you today. And there will be a test. So, it's responsible for producing an enzyme which prevents Alzheimer's disease. It increases your metabolic rate. So as your estrogen goes down, and your metabolism slows down, and the imbalances are happening, gaining weight is very common. It increases our insulin sensitivity. It regulates our body temperature, helps prevent muscle damage and maintains muscles, improves sleep, decreases risk of macular degeneration, glaucoma, cataracts, and prevents dry eyes. It helps with our heart health, maintains elasticity, inhibits plaque formation, lowers triglycerides, so it's healthy for our heart. So if you think about it, when we hit menopause and the hormones start to change, typically that's about when all the diseases of age start to rise and come into play. So if we look backwards a little bit and balance our hormones, perhaps we can do a lot of preventative work and anti-aging. So it also increases the water content of our skin.
Your exercises.
Helps with fine motor skills, enhances the production of nerve growth factor, improves our cholesterol, helps our memory, our mood, our concentration. There's estrogen receptors in your colon, so it could be involved in colon cancer prevention. And it helps regulate the neurotransmitters for mental health. And just one note on the last slide. There's certain autoimmune conditions, such as rheumatoid arthritis and lupus. These are an estrogen dominant phase in this autoimmune condition. So anyone with an autoimmune disease really does need to be looking at their hormones because there are definite imbalances taking place. Alcohol. Who likes to have a few drinks now and then? So alcohol in women will increase your risk of breast cancer if you regularly take in more than 1 drink a day. It increases the estradiol production and decreases the ability of the liver to clear it. So it's shutting down some pathways and leaving other pathways more open to produce more riskier estrogens in the metabolites. So if we have an estrogen deficiency, this is a state of accelerated aging. Only giving estrogen by skin. If you take it orally, again like Premarin, that can increase your blood pressure, increase clotting risks, increase your triglycerides, liver enzymes, gallstones, increase sex hormone binding globulin, which decreases your testosterone, and there goes your sex drive. Increases your serotonin neurotransmitter metabolism, so mental health comes up. Increases CRP, which is an inflammatory factor for heart disease. So if that's going up, your heart disease risks are going up. This is not seen when taking estrogen topically. Okay, so testing. There's all kinds of testings out there. So you may say, well, I'll just go to my doctor and I'll get a serum test. So a blood test. This can be somewhat helpful before you're on hormones. And it's only helpful if you're, one, not on hormones, or you're taking hormones orally, which, of course, I'm not recommending that we do any oral estrogen. After that, though, once you're on a topical hormone, if we're relying on blood work, it doesn't show up in the blood very, very minutely. And it's actually transported by the lymphatic system throughout the body. And when we test saliva, it will show up there very significantly. So we don't need to do high doses like you do orally. We can microdose it a lot more because it's actually little, goes a long way. It's actually getting through your body. So when we do a saliva test, it's kind of like a biopsy without having to cut you open or take a sample. It's very non-invasive. Topical hormones don't necessarily show up in the urine either. So there are some urine tests out there which can have good clinical significance if we're at higher risks of, say, breast cancer history or liver issues, or you're on hormones and we've tried, it looks balanced on the saliva results, but yet we're not getting the results we're looking for. It could be that there is some down regulation of different metabolism pathways and it's not getting to where we need. So we may need to investigate further to look to see what's going on and address those issues. Symptoms of progesterone loss can include anxiety, depression, irritability, mood swings, insomnia, pain and inflammation, osteoporosis, excessive menstruation. So when we're dosing progesterone bioidentically, so there is now available commercially a product called Prometrium. So that is progesterone. It's in a peanut oil base. So peanut oil may not be the best for everybody. Peanut oil also contains what's called arachidonic acid, which produces inflammation. So if you're already in a state of high inflammation, that may kind of be fueling a little bit of that inflammatory cycle that you're in. We compound it in coconut oil. So for some people, that is a better oil choice. So putting progesterone in an oil base actually will increase the ability for progesterone to get absorbed orally. And when we do that, though, it's absorbed very quickly, but it tails off. It's out of your system in about 4 hours. So it may help you. Initially, it's usually dosed at night because progesterone orally converts to more anti-anxiety, antidepressive, and sleepy metabolites, because sleep is that ever quest by a lot of people. And it can be very helpful, but if it's tailing off and 4 hours later you're waking up and you're like, oh, I'm awake again, then we can switch to a sustained release formula or a modified release. So it will release slower over approximately 8 hours, and that often will be a better fit for a lot of people. The only people that wouldn't work for is potentially if you have clear digestive issues. So some of the other influences is particle size. So the smaller the particle size of progesterone, the better absorption and the better the results will be. So with PCCA, we have a special micronized progesterone. It is a smaller particle size than any other manufacturer of progesterone, even the Prometrium. So when you deal with progesterone, getting the PCCA formulations from a PCCA compounding pharmacy is the best route to go. Testosterone, we're all familiar with the libido, that it's got some association there. That's not the only portion of libido, but that's a whole other talk. Benefits: increasing your lean muscle mass, vaginal health, cardiovascular function. Again, that endothelial, that's the actual heart muscles. Neuroprotective effects in the brain, has vasodilation, so it can bring down blood pressure, it improves our strength, and decreases our total and visceral fat and waist circumference. So this is also dosed transdermally through the skin. Orally, it's not well absorbed. Cortisol, that is our stress hormone, and that is the master switch. So if we have a lot of stress in our life, especially if it's a stress over a long period of time, this can have very detrimental effects on the rest of our hormones and on organ function. So it's a major consideration. So if there is that history there, then we want to be testing out what is the cortisol doing, because if we don't address that, we will never get the rest of the hormones balanced, because this will be overriding everything. Too much or too little cortisol can impact the functionality of thyroid, for instance. So we need to convert our T4 from our thyroid to the active form T3 in the body, and too much cortisol or not enough will stop that conversion. So again, supporting and balancing all the hormones in the body functions. When cortisol is very high, it converts our testosterone to estrogen, which can lead to more estrogen dominant symptoms, which could be hot flashes, night sweats, breast tenderness, moodiness, irritability. Someone feel like there's like a beast being awakening in them? So, how can you recognize signs of stress? And sometimes, more often than not, people around us will recognize that we're not on our game well before we do. So thank you very much. Anyone have any questions?
You commented that you use soy as one of your...
Hormones can be sourced from soy, but the hormones I use are not.
Okay. As we all know, soy is linked to breast cancer predominantly.
Well, are different things on the different isoflavones from soy.
Mhm.
But